Welcome to Literary Insights. This is the summary of the book Smarter, Faster, Better: The Secrets of Being Productive in Life and Business, Charles Duhigg. If you like this content, please consider subscribing and liking this video. The author was struggling with productivity and work-life balance when writing his first book. He reached out to Atul Gawande, a renowned surgeon and author, to ask for advice. Although Gawande declined, citing his own busy schedule, the author learned that Gawande deliberately makes time for leisure and family. The author defines productivity as using your time, energy, and intellect to accomplish meaningful goals with a minimum of wasted effort. Productivity means different things to different people in different contexts. The author investigated the secrets of highly productive individuals and companies. He discovered 8 core ideas. Having a sense of control and motivation. The military uses a technique to teach new recruits to feel motivated by giving them choices biased toward action. Establishing psychological safety. Google and early Saturday Night Live succeeded by creating an environment where people felt comfortable taking risks. Developing mental models. We can maintain focus by constructing stories and narratives in our minds. Pilots averted disaster by telling themselves a story that allowed them to land a plane. Setting the right goals. We should have both ambitious, long-term goals as well as small, concrete objectives. Israel was unprepared for war because leaders focused on the wrong goals. Fostering trust and managing others. The FBI solved a kidnapping using an agile management style and techniques from an old auto plant. Making decisions by envisioning multiple futures. A poker player won a championship by imagining many possible ways a hand could unfold instead of hoping for a single desired outcome. Encouraging creative desperation. Disney made Frozen by fostering productive tension and a sense of crisis in its team. Turning information into knowledge. Schools improved by making information more difficult to absorb, forcing students to grapple with it. The core ideas in this book can expand people's productivity. By applying motivation, trust, mental models, SMART goals, envisioning the future, and other techniques, we can achieve more with less stress and struggle. Robert Philippe was a successful 60-year-old businessman who built an auto parts empire through hard work and perseverance. He and his wife Viola went on a month-long vacation to South America to celebrate Robert's birthday. However, Robert started acting strangely during their trip, experiencing disorientation, mood swings, and fatigue. When they returned home, Robert's symptoms persisted and even worsened. He became apathetic, gave up his hobbies, and avoided going into the office. Extensive medical tests found no evidence of illness except for a small amount of pooled blood in Robert's striatum, a part of the brain involved in motivation and reward processing. A year after the vacation, Robert continued to show a lack of motivation and interest in his usual activities. He knew what needed to be done for his business but lacked the drive to follow through. Doctors concluded that damage to Robert's striatum from the brain bleed likely caused his amotivational syndrome, characterized by a reduced ability to anticipate rewards and a lack of goal-directed behavior. The case study illustrates how motivation and a sense of reward are dependent on specific brain regions like the striatum. Damage to these areas can produce a pattern of apathy and lack of drive even when a person remains otherwise cognitively intact. Robert's story highlights the importance of motivation and reward for productivity, goal pursuit, and decision-making. In summary, the anecdote teaches us that motivation is rooted in biology, not just willpower or work ethic. When key parts of the brain's reward system are disrupted, motivation suffers, and with it the ability to achieve. Productivity is deeply connected to the neural processes that make rewards feel rewarding and give purpose and meaning to our actions. A neurologist named Michel Habib studied several cases of people who experienced a sudden loss of motivation and drive after minor brain injuries. These people suffered small hemorrhages in their striatum, a part of the brain involved in motivation and mood regulation. Despite otherwise normal brain function, these people experienced a total absence of drive or momentum. Mauricio Delgado, a researcher at the University of Pittsburgh, conducted experiments to better understand the neurological basis of motivation and excitement. In one experiment, he had people play a boring guessing game while in an fMRI scanner. He found that people's striata lit up when they were playing the game, indicating feelings of anticipation and excitement. One participant asked to continue playing the boring guessing game at home, even after being told the outcome was predetermined. This surprised Delgado and made him wonder why people would be motivated to play a meaningless game. In a follow-up experiment, Delgado had people play a guessing game where they were in control of their guesses half the time, and a computer made the guesses for them the other half of the time. He found that people's striata were active and they reported enjoying themselves much more when they were in control and able to make their own guesses. Delgado concluded that the anticipation of choice and agency itself can motivate behavior and activate the brain's reward circuitry. Having autonomy and control over one's actions is intrinsically motivating and exciting. In summary, these findings suggest that motivation and drive originate in the striatum, and that having a sense of autonomy and control over one's choices is a major source of motivation. Damage or impairment of the striatum can lead to a loss of motivation, excitement, and agency. Participants in Pascal Michelon's experiment got bored when they didn't have control or choice. They wanted the experiment to end. This showed that choice and a sense of control are crucial for motivation. Self-motivation is a skill that can be learned. The key is believing you have control and authority over your situation. When people feel in control, they work harder, persist longer, and are happier and more satisfied. Providing people opportunities to make choices, even inconsequential ones, helps trigger motivation by giving them a sense of control and autonomy. For example, companies often ask customers questions to give them a sense of choice, even if it doesn't really matter. Any choice helps create motivation. For Eric Quintanilla, simply making a choice wasn't enough motivation. He struggled to find purpose and direction in his life after high school. Joining the Marines gave him the mental makeover he needed. The Marines' new boot camp focused on helping recruits develop motivation, confidence, and a sense of ambition. The Marines needed self-motivated troops who could make independent decisions in difficult situations. General Krulak reformed boot camp to help turn weaker applicants into self-starters. He worked with psychologists to better teach recruits how to think for themselves. In summary, motivation comes from a sense of autonomy and control. But for some people, more is needed, a purpose or direction. The Marines provided that for Quintanilla. General Krulak wanted to teach Marine recruits self-motivation and an internal locus of control, the belief that they could influence their outcomes through their own choices and actions. Studies show people with an internal locus of control tend to be more successful and satisfied. Krulak aimed to train recruits to develop this mindset. Krulak redesigned Marine basic training to give recruits opportunities to make decisions and take control. For example, recruits had to figure out how to clean the mess hall with little guidance. They were praised for stepping up to lead or make hard choices. The goal was for them to experience the thrill of being in control and become addicted to that feeling. The Crucible was a grueling 3-day challenge at the end of basic training meant to teach self-motivation. Recruits had to complete difficult obstacle courses over 50 miles with little food or sleep. They were told anyone who lagged or stopped would be dropped. One obstacle called Sergeant Timmerman's Tank required recruits to cross a pit wearing gear and gas masks without touching the ground. They had to work as a team, led by a team leader's verbal commands, to figure out how to get across using boards and ropes. After struggling with different approaches, they eventually made it across by standing on 2 boards and using ropes to shuffle the boards across together. This challenge taught them teamwork, perseverance, and the ability to solve complex problems under duress. In summary, Krulak aimed to build Marines' internal locus of control through experiences that gave them opportunities to take charge of difficult situations. The redesign of basic training and obstacles like the Crucible were meant to teach recruits self-motivation by putting them in control of complex challenges. The team leader came up with a workaround to get his recruits across the pit with gas masks on that prevented verbal communication. He began shrugging his shoulders and swinging his arms to indicate the lifting rhythm. The recruits caught on and began singing and moving in unison. Though technically against the rules, the drill sergeant praised their initiative in figuring out a solution. After 24 hours and a dozen obstacles, Quintanilla's platoon reached the final challenge, a steep hill called the Grim Reaper. Exhausted, the recruits linked arms to help each other summit. At the top, they received the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor insignia, officially becoming Marines. Quintanilla said boot camp teaches you to push yourself beyond what you thought were your limits. Though the material rewards of being a Marine are few, satisfaction and retention rates are high. Studies show recruits gain an internal locus of control. Research in nursing homes found residents who rebelled against strict rules and asserted control over their lives were happier, healthier, and lived longer. Their small acts of defiance were psychologically powerful in demonstrating they were still in control of their lives. The most motivating choices convince us we're in control and give our actions meaning. We can build an internal locus of control by turning chores into meaningful choices and asserting authority over our lives. Quintanilla re-enlisted because he missed the motivation to push himself. Viola Philippe overcame being born legally blind and albinic through fierce determination. Despite the school wanting to put her in remedial classes, she excelled and became a teacher. She sewed her own clothes and traveled widely. Her daughter said, "You've never met a more determined person." Julia Rosovsky was 25 years old and unsure of her career path when she decided to apply to business schools. She was accepted to the Yale School of Management in 2010. Like all new students, she was assigned to a study group. She expected the group to become close friends who would learn together and help each other figure out their careers. Study groups are common in MBA programs and help students learn teamwork. However, Julia's study group experience did not meet her expectations. The group members didn't seem interested in bonding or helping each other. They didn't share personal details or life goals. The group felt like just another assignment to get through. Julia was disappointed by her study group. However, she learned from the experience. She realized that the lack of psychological safety in the group prevented real teamwork and learning. Psychological safety refers to feeling like you can take risks and be vulnerable in front of others without fear of negative consequences. Julia drew on this experience when she later joined Google and helped teams improve psychological safety. She found that teams low in psychological safety tended to lack open communication and were less likely to take risks. Teams high in psychological safety, like Saturday Night Live, were able to be more creative and successful. Julia's story shows how important psychological safety is for teamwork and learning. Even though her first experience with a study group was underwhelming, she gained valuable insight from it that she applied to help other teams. Her ability to find meaning in that difficult experience helped propel her career forward. The key lessons are: psychological safety is essential for teamwork, learning, creativity, and success. Even difficult experiences can be opportunities to gain useful insight if we reflect on them. Finding meaning and lessons in setbacks can help propel our personal growth. Julia joined a study group in business school, but it was a daily source of stress. There were subtle power struggles and members were critical of each other. The group fell apart. Julia then joined a case competition team that was very different. The members came from diverse backgrounds but bonded over their enthusiasm for the cases. They supported each other's ideas and had fun working together. They won 2 national competitions and became close friends. After graduating, Julia worked at Google in the People Analytics Group, which studied employee behavior and experiences to improve productivity and happiness. Google had previously done Project Oxygen, which identified 8 skills of effective managers. They then launched Project Aristotle to determine how to build the perfect team. The researchers first reviewed academic literature on teams but found mixed and contradictory results. They then interviewed Google employees and found team effectiveness was subjective. They measured many variables of Google teams to try and determine what made some teams more successful. They found no patterns based solely on team members' personalities, backgrounds, or skills. The researchers eventually concluded that psychological safety, dependability, structure and clarity, meaning, and impact were key factors for team success at Google. Psychological safety, feeling safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other, was the most important factor. The findings resonated with Julia, explaining why her case competition team succeeded and her study group struggled. The case team built psychological safety through enthusiasm and support, while her study group lacked it due to subtle criticisms and power dynamics. The results of Project Aristotle have been implemented at Google to improve team building. The findings likely apply beyond Google and provide guidance for anyone looking to build a successful team. Julia Rozovsky and her colleagues at Google's Project Aristotle analyzed data from 180 teams to determine what made some teams more effective than others. They looked at team composition, overlapping memberships, dynamics, and other factors. However, they could not find any patterns to explain differences in team effectiveness. They then shifted their focus to studying group norms, the unwritten rules and standards of behavior that govern how teams function. They found evidence that certain norms were consistently correlated with highly effective teams. In particular, teams where members felt psychologically safe to take risks and be vulnerable tended to be the highest performing. Amy Edmondson, a Harvard professor, had observed a similar phenomenon when studying nurses and medical errors in hospitals. She initially hypothesized that stronger, more cohesive teams would make fewer mistakes. However, she found the opposite. Hospital wards with the strongest teamwork actually reported more errors. Upon further analysis, she realized this was because nurses in these wards felt more comfortable openly reporting and discussing errors. The key factor was not team cohesion itself, but rather the team culture and norms around mistakes. Some teams established norms of openness and psychological safety that encouraged nurses to admit errors without fear of punishment or judgment. Other teams, despite strong cohesion, developed norms that discouraged openness and made nurses reluctant to report mistakes. Edmondson concluded that leaders and team culture were instrumental in determining which norms dominated and, in turn, how openly members communicated. In summary, research by Google and Amy Edmondson showed that group norms, especially around openness and psychological safety, are critical for team effectiveness and performance. While team composition matters, a team's culture and unwritten rules have a far greater influence over how well it functions. Leaders and managers play an essential role in shaping group norms and building a safe environment where team members feel empowered to take risks, make themselves vulnerable, and learn from failures. Lorne Michaels auditioned hundreds of comedians to create Saturday Night Live. However, he ended up hiring people he already knew or who were recommended by friends. The original cast and writers were connected through networks in Canada, Chicago, and Los Angeles. When the staff moved to New York in 1975, most of them only knew each other. They were young, didn't have much money, and spent all their time together, eating meals together and going to the same bars every night. They relied on each other in this new environment. A mythology emerged that the close relationships and pranks among the cast and writers explained the show's chemistry and success. Stories circulated of the cast breaking into each other's apartments, setting fires, gluing furniture to ceilings, ordering excess pizzas, and pulling pranks. The key point is that the strength and relationships within the team were critical to the show's effectiveness, especially early on. The close bonds gave them a sense of psychological safety that allowed them to take risks, give feedback, and work creatively together. In summary, the Saturday Night Live case shows how relationships and psychological safety among team members can be key to a team's success. When the show first started, the close connections among the young, fledgling staff gave them the comfort to take creative risks, even when they were otherwise unsure of what they were doing. Their familiarity and reliance on one another compensated for their lack of experience. Over time, as the show became an institution, these relationships and dynamics undoubtedly evolved. But early on, they were essential. Strong, close relationships created the psychological safety for creativity. The original Saturday Night Live team is often held up as a model of successful group dynamics. However, in reality, the relationships and team dynamics were quite complicated. There were rivalries, infighting, and competition among the actors and writers. Many did not particularly like each other and formed shifting alliances and cliques. However, despite these tensions, the group was still able to be remarkably productive. This was because the group dynamics fostered psychological safety, the feeling that people could take risks and be honest without fear of negative consequences. People felt free to pitch ideas, even if those ideas were criticized or shot down by others. Lorne Michaels, the show's creator, deliberately chose people with disparate sensibilities and tastes. His goal was for each person to maintain their own voice rather than disappear into the group. This diversity of perspectives, along with the psychological safety to express those perspectives, was key to the show's success. A group of researchers studied group dynamics and intelligence to try and determine what makes some teams superior. They found that collectively intelligent teams, like the original SNL team, share certain characteristics. These include psychological safety. Team members feel free to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. Equal distribution of conversational turn-taking. Rather than a few people dominating the conversation, all members participate fully. Social sensitivity. Team members tend to score higher on measures of empathy, as evidenced by things like accurately reading emotional expressions. Diversity of perspectives. The team incorporates a range of viewpoints, skills, and backgrounds. Collective intelligence emerges from the interactions and dynamics between team members, not just the intelligence or skills of any individual person. Some of the most collectively intelligent teams are those that seem the messiest or least efficient on the surface. But they foster the conditions that allow new ideas to emerge. Researchers found that a group's collective intelligence was not determined by the individual IQs or talents of group members. Instead, it depended on the social sensitivity and conversational turn-takings of the group. The most successful groups had two key attributes. Equality in conversational turn-taking. Everyone spoke roughly the same amount, so all voices were heard. This did not mean perfectly equal speaking time, but that overall, the distribution was relatively balanced. High average social sensitivity. Group members were good at reading each other's emotional states and needs based on tone of voice, body language, and facial expressions. They seemed to intuitively understand when someone felt upset or left out. The example of Saturday Night Live shows how these dynamics work in practice. The show's creator and producer, Lorne Michaels, was deliberately focused on giving everyone a voice and bringing together people who were willing to be sensitive to each other. Even though the comedians and writers were combative, Michaels fostered an environment where they felt psychologically safe enough to share ideas, accept critiques, and support each other. Michaels himself demonstrated high social sensitivity, checking in on people and making sure everyone's needs were met. And he expected the same kind of sensitivity from the cast and writers. Though they weren't necessarily friends, they trusted each other enough to share ideas and give feedback without fear of harsh repercussions. The key to psychological safety in a group is a leader who actively listens to others, makes them feel heard, points out their good ideas, and encourages them to speak up. These small acts of social sensitivity and inclusiveness can make a big difference. So in summary, the researchers found that collective intelligence comes not from individual talent, but from the social dynamics of the group, especially how members treat each other. The most successful groups are able to foster an environment of psychological safety through balancing conversational turn-taking and demonstrating social sensitivity. Strong, inclusive leadership plays an important role in creating this environment. Psychological safety is the belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. It is the key factor that allows teams to succeed. Research by Google's Project Aristotle found that the teams with the highest psychological safety also had leaders who modeled listening and social sensitivity. They gave everyone an equal voice and encouraged sensitivity among teammates. The head of Google's People Operations said the biggest takeaway is that how teams work together matters more than who is on the teams. The myths that teams need superstars or consensus or constant work are wrong. What matters is psychological safety, giving everyone a voice, and social sensitivity. To create psychological safety, leaders should model certain behaviors, not interrupt, summarize what people say, admit what they don't know, make sure all speak in meetings, encourage expressing frustrations, call out and resolve conflicts. These tactics come down to giving everyone a voice and being sensitive to how others feel. The findings have spread throughout Google and changed how teams and leaders operate. Leaders are much more conscious of listening, interrupting, and encouraging everyone to speak. Mistakes and conflicts are openly discussed, building psychological safety. Teams are increasingly important in workplaces. The unwritten rules of what makes them succeed or fail are the same everywhere. Psychological safety, equal voices, and social sensitivity are key. Leaders establish the route to psychological safety through their choices and messages. While less efficient short-term, psychological safety is most productive long-term. If motivation comes from giving people control, psychological safety is key for when people come together in groups. Teams become amplifications of their internal cultures, for better or worse. Psychological safety allows for honest discussion without fear of punishment. Here's a summary. Air France Flight 447 crashed into the Atlantic Ocean in 2009, killing all 228 passengers and crew. It took nearly 2 years to find the data recorders and determine the cause of the crash. Investigators eventually found that the crash was primarily due to human error and loss of situational awareness by the pilots. None of the plane's systems malfunctioned. The Airbus A330 that crashed was a highly automated plane that required pilots to monitor systems and respond to prompts rather than actively fly the plane for most of the flight. This reduced workload made flying easier but also allowed for loss of vigilance. About 4 hours into the flight, the pitot tubes froze over, disabling the autopilot and autothrottle systems. This caused alarms to sound in the cockpit. The crew reacted incorrectly to the warnings, pulling up on the controls instead of leveling the plane. This caused the plane to stall and ultimately crash into the ocean. If the pilots had done nothing at all upon losing the autopilot, the plane would have continued flying safely as the pitot tubes thawed. But the pilot pulled up on the controls, causing the plane to gain altitude, lose lift, and stall. By the time the pilots realized the plane was stalling, it was too late to recover. Lack of situational awareness and incorrect reaction to warnings ultimately doomed the flight. The crash illustrates how over-reliance on automation can lead to loss of critical thinking skills and situational awareness, especially in abnormal situations. In this case, it contributed to a tragic outcome that proper training and active piloting may have avoided. The pilots were caught by surprise when the autopilot disengaged and the plane's instruments began malfunctioning due to icing. The co-pilot's attention was caught by the scrolling text on his screen, causing him to miss that the pilot was pulling up on the control stick and raising the plane's nose. This caused the plane to climb higher, close to its maximum altitude. By the time the co-pilot noticed, he shouted at the pilot to descend. The pilot pushed forward on the stick, but then jerked back, arresting the descent. The plane stalled and began buffeting. For 10 seconds, neither pilot spoke. The plane rose above its maximum altitude. Though the instruments began functioning properly again and provided correct information and instructions, the pilots were cognitively tumbled on their screens and did not notice. Alarms and warnings sounded, but the pilots were unaware of what was really happening. When the co-pilot told the pilot to minimize control inputs, the pilot asked if they were in TO/GA mode. This indicated a fatal misunderstanding, sealing the fate of all on board. In summary, the pilots were unprepared for the autopilot to disengage. Their attention was caught by the most obvious stimuli in front of them, causing them to miss critical information, and they failed to gain a full understanding of the situation. By the time they realized the severity, it was too late. TO/GA is a procedure where pilots abort a landing by increasing thrust and raising the nose of the plane. It is practiced in simulation many times. At lower altitudes, TO/GA works by increasing speed and altitude. But at higher altitudes like 38,000 feet, the air is too thin for TO/GA to be effective. Raising the nose just increases stall. The correct response is to lower the nose. However, in emergencies, people can rely on reactive thinking and habituated responses, even if they are not appropriate for the situation. Pilot Bonin reacted with the familiar TO/GA response, even though it was incorrect and dangerous at that altitude. The plane stalled and began losing altitude rapidly. The pilots were confused and panicked, not understanding what was happening or how to fix it. By the time the co-pilot took control and tried to recover, it was too late. The plane crashed into the ocean. Psychologists studied how some people are able to stay focused in high-stress, chaotic situations while others become overwhelmed. They found that those who excel rely less on reactive habitual responses and more on an ability to determine where to focus their attention based on the demands of the specific situation. As an example, NICU nurses have to monitor many babies with constant alarms and signals. The most skilled nurses were able to predict decline or recovery in babies based on subtle warning signs, focusing on what really mattered. The key is not relying on habits and reactions, but adapting to the complex situation. In summary, the key lessons are: 1. Reactive and habitual thinking can be dangerous in emergencies, especially when habits are not appropriate for the situation. 2. Some people are better able to focus their attention on what really matters in complex, chaotic situations rather than relying on reactions and habits. And 3. Adapting to the demands of the situation and determining where to focus attention is key. Habits and reactions alone are not enough. Researchers studied nurses with a gift for spotting problems in hospitals. They found these nurses were adept at building mental models, creating vivid pictures in their minds of what they expected to see. When reality didn't match their mental models, it triggered their attention. For example, a nurse named Darlene noticed subtle warning signs in a baby because she had a strong mental model of what a healthy baby should look like. The other nurse missed the signs because she lacked a robust mental model. People who are good at building mental models tend to be visual thinkers who narrate their experiences, imagine future conversations in detail, and constantly engage in forecasting and daydreaming. This helps them choose what to focus on and notice unexpected events. The pilots in the Air France Flight 447 crash lacked mental models to help them understand the plane's problems, so they became confused and cognitively tumbled. The co-pilot kept changing his mental model, while the other pilot clung to an inaccurate model. Their lack of useful mental models contributed to the crash. Researchers studied productive executives and found the superstars tended to work on only a few projects at a time, choose assignments that required new skills, and join projects in early stages. This exposed them to more information and new ideas. Though riskier, joining new projects helped them build better mental models and become more productive. The key traits of those who are adept at building mental models are: they are visual thinkers, they narrate experiences, they imagine the future in detail, they constantly engage in forecasting and daydreaming, they choose where to focus their attention, and they notice unexpected events. Building robust mental models helps people become more productive and make better decisions. The summary highlights how those skilled in developing mental models build them through visual thinking, narration, imagination, daydreaming, and choosing early-stage complex work. These mental models then help them focus their attention, notice important details, and avoid confusion in difficult situations. Overall, the ability to create useful mental models is a key driver of productivity and sound judgment. Superstar executives shared some common traits and behaviors. They were prolific generators of theories and mental models to explain events around them. They constantly told stories and theorized about what was happening to develop a deeper understanding. They took in lots of information by being copied on many emails and participating in many meetings. This gave them more data to build mental models. On average, superstars took on only 5 projects at once so they could focus. But they outperformed others because they had a systematic way of thinking deeply about those projects. Developing the habit of building mental models and theorizing about their world made the superstars better at their jobs. Researchers found people who did this earned higher pay and better outcomes. The story of Qantas Flight 32 illustrates how important mental models and a questioning culture are for high-performance teams. Captain de Crespigny rigorously drilled his crew on their mental models of how to react in emergencies before each flight. He wanted them to visualize what they would do in response to problems. De Crespigny encouraged his crew to question him and speak up if they disagreed with his decisions. He wanted an open culture where people felt comfortable challenging each other. When an engine exploded in mid-flight, the advanced mental models and open culture were crucial. De Crespigny and his crew were able to stay calm and go through emergency procedures to land the damaged plane safely, saving all on board. Their systematic preparation and ability to work together under pressure was key. In summary, the research studies and examples show how building mental models, creating theories about what's happening in one's environment, encouraging open communication and dissent, and rigorous preparation can lead to superior performance and outcomes. Questioning, theorizing, and imagining both success and failure help teams and leaders anticipate problems, react quickly, and achieve difficult goals. Qantas Flight 32 suffered a major mechanical failure, with damage to many of the plane's systems shortly after takeoff. The captain, Richard de Crespigny, initially asked air traffic control for permission to climb higher, but then agreed with his co-pilots to maintain their current altitude. De Crespigny realized the many alarms and computer alerts were overwhelming the pilots and causing confusion. He told the pilots to forget the pumps, forget the other 8 tanks, forget the total fuel quantity gauge. De Crespigny decided to imagine the plane as a simple Cessna to help focus his mental model. This allowed him to determine what was most critical to land the plane. With few systems functioning, the pilots were not sure the plane would remain airborne or slow enough upon landing. But de Crespigny was able to land the plane safely using his mental model of flying a Cessna. Investigators later said the plane was the most damaged Airbus A380 to ever land safely. Pilots and simulators could not replicate de Crespigny's successful recovery. The story shows how strong mental models can help in emergency situations by providing focus when there is too much information. The Air France pilots lacked effective mental models to help them respond to the plane stall, while de Crespigny's mental model of a Cessna allowed him to land QF-32. In 1972, Eli Zira was appointed to head Israel's military intelligence agency. His goal was to provide clear assessments about the risk of war to Israeli leaders and the public. Zira developed a strict formula, known as the concept, to determine the likelihood of an Arab invasion. He argued that Israel's enemies would not attack unless they had a powerful air force and missiles that could hit Tel Aviv. Without meeting those conditions, Arab threats were just rhetoric. In 1973, Egypt amassed troops along the Suez Canal, leading Israel's leaders to worry about an imminent attack. Zira dismissed the risk, saying Egypt did not have the necessary military capabilities. Israel mobilized, but no invasion occurred. Zira's reputation was enhanced. By 1973, Zira had reduced anxiety in Israel about the threat of war. He provided the clarity and confident assessments that Israeli leaders and citizens wanted. His rise to more powerful positions seemed inevitable. Researchers have developed a questionnaire to measure a personality trait called the need for cognitive closure, which is the desire to reach a quick, confident judgment versus ambiguity. The questions seem to test organization and openness to other viewpoints, but actually measure this trait. People with a high need for cognitive closure tend to be more decisive and self-assured. They are often more successful, staying married longer and having better jobs. But they may make overconfident judgments and ignore contradictory evidence. The summary suggests Zira may have had a high need for cognitive closure, quickly reaching confident conclusions that downplayed risks and stuck to a formula even as evidence mounted against it. This personality trait, while associated with some benefits, can also lead to poor judgments and unwillingness to consider other perspectives. Most people show a mix of preferences for order and chaos in their lives. However, about 20% of people show a higher need for decisiveness, predictability, and closure. These people tend to be self-disciplined and seen as leaders, but also can be close-minded and authoritarian. The need for closure introduces biases. People with a high need for closure may make hasty decisions and be unwilling to reconsider them. They crave the feeling of productivity over common sense. In 1973, Israel's military intelligence chief, Eli Zira, had a high need for closure. He ridiculed endless debates and opinions that differed from his own. Once he made an estimate, everyone had to agree with it. In the days leading up to the Yom Kippur War, Israel received many warnings that Egypt and Syria were preparing to attack. But Zira dismissed them, insisting Egypt and Syria were too weak to attack Israel. He froze on this view, unwilling to consider other possibilities. On October 5, Zira told leaders that Egypt and Syria would not attack. The next day, Israel's military was caught by surprise when Egypt and Syria invaded on Yom Kippur, starting the war. Zira's need for closure and unwillingness to reconsider his views had blinded him to the impending attack. The example shows how a high need for closure can be a disadvantage in situations that require openness to new evidence and a willingness to reevaluate one's views. Zira's desire for decisiveness and discipline led him to get locked into a mistaken estimate of the situation. In 1973, Israel was attacked by Egypt and Syria on Yom Kippur, catching the country by surprise. Israel's leaders had downplayed warning signs of an imminent invasion to avoid worrying the public. By the time Israel's PM Golda Meir warned of an attack, enemy forces were already 2 miles inside Israeli territory. Israel eventually halted and pushed back the invasions, but at the cost of over 10,000 Israeli casualties. The war was deeply traumatic for Israel and shattered the country's confidence in its leadership. Around 15 years later, GE asked an organizational psychologist for help improving some of its factories. GE was a very successful company known for setting concrete goals. Since the 1940s, GE had used a system where every employee wrote their manager a letter setting their objectives and how they would achieve them. By the 1980s, GE used a system called SMART goals. These were specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Managers had to get very concrete specifics and timelines for goals. GE believed in the effectiveness of SMART goals based on research showing specific, measurable goals led to better performance. A 1975 study found experienced typists typed faster when given specific goals to improve their speed and shown how to measure their progress. Even though the goals only took 15 minutes to set, the typists improved their speed and sustained it months later. Over 400 studies show specific, challenging goals lead to better results than vague goals like do your best. SMART goals in particular help translate vague aims into concrete plans of action. The summary outlines how Israel's failure to set specific warnings about the Yom Kippur War led to catastrophe, while GE's success with concrete goal setting like SMART goals helped fuel its performance. The contrast shows why specific, ambitious goals tend to produce better outcomes than ambiguity or complacency. SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound objectives that help provide discipline and structure to achieving goals. However, overly focusing on SMART goals can lead to tunnel vision, prioritizing easy tasks over important ones, and fixating on completing objectives rather than questioning if they are the right goals. Researchers found that people with SMART goals tend to seize on the easiest tasks, become obsessed with finishing projects, and freeze on priorities once a goal has been set. In the late 1980s, GE executives found that 2 struggling divisions, a nuclear equipment manufacturer and a jet engine plant, had been setting many trivial SMART goals that provided a sense of accomplishment but didn't actually improve performance. To address this, GE introduced workouts, meetings where employees could suggest ambitious long-term goals without the constraints of the SMART framework. The idea was to encourage bigger thinking and then figure out how to achieve the goals. This led to many successful new ideas and improved profits. However, workouts were time-consuming, couldn't be done frequently, and their effects were often short-lived as people returned to their usual ways of thinking. GE wanted to find a way to foster an ambitious mindset all the time. The key lesson is that it's important to balance SMART goals and discipline with the freedom to think big. If people are constantly pushed to focus on achievable short-term results, that's all they will aim for. Giving people the opportunity to dream big leads to more significant goals and innovation. The summary outlines how GE discovered the limitations of an over-reliance on SMART goals, introduced workouts to counteract this and encourage more ambitious thinking, but then sought a way to make that mindset perpetual. The key takeaway is the need to balance concrete short-term goals with opportunities for bigger-picture thinking. Japan's rail system was outdated and too slow, taking up to 20 hours for trips. In 1955, the head of Japan's railways challenged engineers to build a faster train. Engineers initially said 65 to 75 miles per hour was realistic due to safety concerns. The railway head pushed them to aim for 120 miles per hour. To achieve this, the engineers made many innovations: individual motors for each car, improved gears, reinforced tracks, tunnels through mountains, etc. In 1964, the bullet train traveled between Tokyo and Osaka in under 4 hours at 120 miles per hour. It spurred economic growth and high-speed rail worldwide. Jack Welch took inspiration from this and instituted stretch goals at GE, extremely ambitious goals to drive innovation. Divisions had to set seemingly impossible goals. For example, Welch pushed the aircraft engine division to cut defects by 70% in 3 years. They drastically changed training, hiring, organization, etc. and cut defects by 75%, improving efficiency. Studies show stretch goals can spark innovation and progress. But they must be paired with concrete steps, like SMART goals, to avoid demoralizing people. An experiment showed people performed better at an audacious but achievable goal, 100 m in 10 seconds, versus an actually impossible one, 200 m in 10 seconds. Stretch goals must be within the realm of possibility to motivate. In summary, the combination of ambitious stretch goals and concrete SMART goals can help achieve seemingly impossible objectives through innovation and discipline. But stretch goals must be grounded enough to appear achievable. Frank Jansen, a 63-year-old man, was kidnapped at gunpoint from his home by 2 men and a woman posing as canvassers. He was tasered, bound, blindfolded, and taken to a secret location where he was held for 5 days. The kidnappers demanded $40,000 in ransom from Jansen's wife and threatened to kill him if she contacted the police. Despite the threats, Jansen's wife reported the kidnapping to the FBI. The lead investigators, Chris Howard and Jeffrey Kelly, employed lean and agile thinking to solve the complex case. They created a culture of trust that empowered individuals and teams to take ownership, be flexible in their approach, and learn from failure. Rather than follow a rigid set of rules, FBI agents were encouraged to hypothesize, experiment, and change course quickly based on new information. They used visual management tools to share key insights across teams and identify gaps. This allowed them to connect seemingly unrelated clues and locate Jansen within 5 days of his abduction. The investigators' ability to solve a notoriously difficult type of case, a cold kidnapping in which the victim has no relationship with the perpetrators, showed the power of lean and agile principles applied to knowledge work. By promoting a culture where failure was accepted and risks were rewarded, Howard and Kelly were able to unleash the creativity and problem-solving skills of individuals in a complex system. The result was an extraordinary achievement, rescuing Frank Jansen and catching his kidnappers in just over 100 hours. The summary covers the key details of Frank Jansen's kidnapping and the FBI's rescue, highlighting how the investigators employed lean and agile thinking to solve the case. The cultural elements that enabled success, trust, empowerment, flexibility, learning from failure, are noted along with the visual tools used to share information across teams. The summary also articulates the significance of the outcome, that the FBI was able to solve an uncommon and difficult type of kidnapping in a short period of time due to their innovative approach. Frank Jansen, a national security consultant, was kidnapped from his North Carolina home. His kidnappers used stun guns to incapacitate him and took him away in a silver Nissan. 3 days later, Jansen's wife received threatening text messages demanding the release of a jailed gang leader named Kelvin Melton in exchange for Jansen's life. Investigators determined the texts were coming from burner phones linked to Melton and his associates. They believed Melton had orchestrated the kidnapping from within prison to punish Jansen's daughter, a prosecutor who had put Melton behind bars. The FBI had little information to go on. They inputted what details they had into a new computer system called Sentinel to look for connections and leads. Rick Madrid, a former auto worker, was interviewing for a job at a shuttered GM plant that was reopening in a partnership with Toyota. Madrid had a history of negligent and drunken behavior at the plant. However, he suspected things might be different under the new management. The key details are: Frank Jansen was kidnapped as revenge against his daughter, a prosecutor who had jailed a gang leader named Kelvin Melton. Melton appeared to be directing the kidnapping from prison using burner phones. The FBI was struggling to find leads and turned to a new computer system called Sentinel for help. Rick Madrid, a formerly negligent auto worker, was hoping for a fresh start at the reopening of the GM plant he had worked at, now under new management. Toyota, the Japanese automaker, decided to reopen the Fremont car manufacturing plant in collaboration with General Motors. For Toyota, it was an opportunity to build cars in the U.S. and increase sales. For GM, it was a chance to learn Toyota's highly efficient manufacturing techniques. As part of the agreement, 80% of workers had to be hired from former GM employees who were laid off 2 years earlier. Rick Madrid, a former GM employee with a history of drinking on the job, interviewed for a position at the new joint venture called NUMMI. Although Madrid had engaged in problematic behavior at GM, he was still a good candidate compared to his former colleagues who did worse things like destroying vehicles. During the interview, Madrid honestly shared his frustrations with the poor management and lack of regard for workers under GM. Surprisingly, his honesty and feedback impressed the Japanese executives, and he was offered a job at NUMMI. Before starting work, Madrid and other new hires traveled to Japan for 2 weeks to train at a Toyota factory. At first, Madrid didn't understand why they were sent there since the factory looked just like GM's. However, during his training, Madrid witnessed a stark difference in how Toyota handled quality control and valued input from all workers. When a worker made a mistake installing a bolt, the entire assembly line stopped so the issue could be properly fixed. Workers were also encouraged to suggest improvements, and managers quickly developed prototypes of their ideas. Madrid learned that the Toyota production system, also known as lean manufacturing, empowered workers at every level to make decisions, fix problems, and continuously improve the process. Toyota believed that frontline workers were in the best position to see issues and develop solutions. GM had initially laughed at this philosophy, believing that American workers only cared about doing as little as possible. However, Toyota insisted that if people were given the chance, they would thrive. The success of the joint venture depended on exporting not just Toyota's tools and techniques, but its entire culture. In summary, Rick Madrid's experience training at Toyota revealed how its innovative manufacturing system harnessed the creativity and talent of all workers. This empowering philosophy stood in stark contrast with the disengaged culture Madrid had known under GM management. In 1994, 2 Stanford professors began studying how companies create a culture of trust. They believed a company's culture was critical to its success, but lacked data to prove it. They studied nearly 200 Silicon Valley tech startups over 15 years. They categorized the companies into 5 culture types. Star model, hire players and give lots of autonomy. Popular with venture capitalists, but prone to internal rivalries and high failure rates. Engineering model, engineers and technical skill drive the culture. Allows fast growth, but limited to technical problems. Bureaucracy model, extensive rules, job descriptions, and hierarchy. Slow and stagnant. Autocracy model, founder/CEO makes all decisions. You work. You do what I say. You get paid. Commitment model, values long-term employees and steady growth. Build a company where people only leave when they retire or die. Invests in employees and work-life balance. The commitment model was by far the most successful. None failed, and they were the fastest to IPO, most profitable, and leanest. Employees were highly engaged and loyal. Customers also stayed loyal due to long-term relationships. The commitment model succeeded largely because it built a culture of trust between employees, managers, and customers. They avoided layoffs, invested in training, and offered generous benefits. Employees turned down higher pay elsewhere, and customers stayed loyal. In the end, the data showed that for entrepreneurs betting on one company, a commitment culture is the winning choice. When people trust the company and each other, they work harder and stick together through challenges. That culture of trust leads to the most enduring success. Rick Madrid was initially skeptical that Numi's new management team would be different than GM's. However, Numi lived up to its promises to empower workers and value their input. Tetsuro Toyota, Numi's president, demonstrated the company's commitment to workers by asking an employee named Joe to pull the end cord to stop the assembly line and fix a problem. Toyota then apologized for not properly instructing managers to empower workers. After this event, workers began frequently pulling the end cords to stop the line and fix problems. This showed that workers had real power and responsibility, which increased their motivation and drive. Numi's productivity and quality dramatically improved compared to when GM operated the plant. Absenteeism and attrition dropped, and there were no issues with substance abuse or sabotage. Numi proved its commitment to workers by avoiding layoffs even during recessions that required 40% production cuts. Executives took pay cuts instead of laying off workers. Rick Madrid ultimately felt pride in working for Numi, a company that empowered him and was named a top quality plant. He felt Numi's managers and workers were united and devoted to each other. Numi serves as an example of the benefits of a commitment culture and empowering workers. Its model has spread to many industries. In summary, giving workers real responsibility and power and proving commitment to them led to tremendous benefits for Numi, its workers, productivity, quality, and morale. A virtuous cycle of empowerment, commitment, and dedication was created. The FBI began developing an upgraded case management system called Sentinel in 1997. After spending $305 million over 11 years, the project was failing. The FBI brought in consultant Chad Fulgham to help get Sentinel back on track. Fulgham proposed an Agile approach inspired by lean manufacturing techniques. This meant decentralizing decision-making, empowering people closest to problems to solve them, encouraging collaboration, and adapting to change. Fulgham argued this could work for the FBI's technology efforts. The FBI agreed to let Fulgham use this approach to complete Sentinel. Fulgham assembled a team of 30 FBI agents and software engineers. They were given flexibility and autonomy to work as needed. The team started by identifying over 1,000 ways Sentinel could be useful to agents. They built prototypes and software to accommodate different needs, adapting as they went. They modeled part of Sentinel on TurboTax to simplify the system for users. The team demonstrated their work every 2 weeks to high-ranking FBI officials who could only provide feedback and suggestions. The team became bolder in their work, eventually developing software that could identify patterns and threats across millions of cases. Sentinel was completed in 16 months, used by 30,000 agents in the first month, and has helped solve thousands of crimes since. The Agile, decentralized approach inspired the team and gave junior members more ambition and freedom. Sentinel transformed the FBI's capabilities and served as an example to the agency. The success showed the benefits of lean management and empowering employees. That's a high-level summary of how the FBI developed Sentinel using an Agile approach inspired by lean manufacturing. The key points are decentralizing control, empowering employees, adapting to change, and the success this approach enabled. The FBI Sentinel software helped agents find a connection between an old informant interview and the Frank Jansen kidnapping case. Sentinel found a link between a phone involved in the kidnapping and an apartment mentioned by the informant. Two junior FBI agents decided independently to follow up on this lead. They questioned people at the apartment and found connections to suspects, leading to a breakthrough in the case. The FBI has adopted an Agile philosophy that empowers junior agents and others to make independent decisions. This helped in the Jansen case. The FBI director aimed to spark a paradigm shift to this mindset. Empowering employees and trusting them to make decisions helps unlock their expertise and motivation. But it requires a culture where employees believe managers support them and trust them. A culture of commitment and trust doesn't guarantee success, but creates the right conditions for good ideas to emerge. However, decentralizing authority also brings risks, like a few disgruntled employees causing major problems. The key lesson is that employees perform better when they feel they have more control and decision-making power, and when they believe their colleagues support them. But trust and commitment are required for this to work. Annie Duke is a professional poker player participating in a high-stakes tournament. She has to decide whether to match an enormous bet from her opponent, Greg Raymer, and risk being knocked out of the tournament, or fold and forfeit her chance to win. She is paralyzed by indecision due to not knowing Raymer's cards and the many possible outcomes. Annie's childhood experiences with an alcoholic mother and anxiety have contributed to her skill in predicting outcomes and forecasting the future. She studied psychology in college to better understand human behavior and decision-making. Research in psychology and economics at the time was focused on understanding how people make decisions and predict the future. The best decision-makers are able to envision various possible futures and choose the best path forward. Annie pursued a PhD in cognitive psychology but dropped out just before finishing her doctorate due to anxiety over the uncertainty of an academic career path. Her skills in forecasting outcomes were not able to overcome her anxiety in that situation. The summary illustrates how Annie's difficult childhood, study of psychology, and experience with uncertainty and anxiety have shaped her ability to predict outcomes and make decisions at the poker table. At times, however, her anxiety can still paralyze her decision-making. Annie Duke, a professional poker player, struggled with anxiety and panic attacks while in graduate school. The anxiety was so debilitating that she had to leave her program and move across the country. Her brother, also a poker player, suggested she try playing poker as a way to get out of the house. She started playing in a local poker game and found that her anxiety lessened while playing. She also discovered she had a knack for it. With her brother's help, she began to improve her skills. She entered her first poker tournament in Las Vegas and did well, winning $30,000. She and her husband then moved to Las Vegas so she could pursue poker professionally. In a high-stakes poker tournament, Annie is facing off against a skilled opponent known as the Fossil Man. She has a pair of tens, but is unsure whether to match the Fossil Man's large bet. She determines that he likely has a very good hand, so she folds, giving up the chance to win a lot of money. It turns out she made the right choice. The Fossil Man had two kings. The hand illustrates the challenge of decision-making when the future is uncertain. While probabilities and forecasts can help, there are no guarantees. Developing a comfort with doubt and learning to calculate what you know and don't know can help in grappling with uncertainty. The U.S. government funded a project to determine how to improve intelligence forecasts. Most groups recruited experts to make predictions about geopolitical events. But one group, the Good Judgment Project, recruited ordinary people and trained them in forecasting techniques. The project found that these forecasting trainees could make predictions that were often more accurate than those of the experts. The Good Judgment Project, GJP, conducted research on improving forecasting accuracy. They found that brief training in probabilistic thinking significantly increased people's ability to predict future events. Probabilistic thinking involves envisioning multiple possible futures, estimating the likelihood of each outcome, and combining these probabilities into an overall prediction. For example, in predicting whether French President Nicolas Sarkozy would win re-election, there were three factors to consider. Incumbency, based on past elections, incumbents win 67% of the time. So Sarkozy has a 67% chance of winning. Approval ratings, Polls showed Sarkozy had only 25% approval, suggesting a 75% chance of losing. Economic factors: based on the weak economy, Sarkozy had only a 45% chance of winning. By averaging these probabilities, 67% plus 25% plus 45% / 3 equals 46%, the overall prediction is that Sarkozy has about a 46% chance of winning re-election. The GJP found that even brief exposure to probabilistic thinking improved forecasting accuracy by up to 50%. The key is being able to consider multiple possibilities, estimate the odds of each, and synthesize them into an overall prediction. This kind of thinking requires acknowledging uncertainty and being willing to consider undesirable outcomes, not just the future you hope for. Probabilistic thinking applies in many areas of life, from career choices to relationships. While you may feel 100% certain of your love for someone now, considering the statistical odds of relationship longevity can lead to better decision-making. The hard part is learning to make choices based on probabilities, not certainties. Experts become comfortable with uncertainty and knowing what they don't know. Novices seek certainty and are prone to less accurate predictions. In summary, the research found that probabilistic thinking, which involves envisioning multiple futures and synthesizing their probabilities, significantly improves forecasting accuracy. Accepting uncertainty and acknowledging what you don't know are hallmarks of probabilistic thinking. With practice, people can become far better at predicting outcomes by thinking probabilistically. The expert player needs to bet $10 to stay in the poker game and have a chance to win $100 if she makes a flush, 5 cards of the same suit. The odds of making the flush are 10 to 1, meaning she can win $10 for every $1 bet. By imagining playing this hand 100 times, the expert player calculates she would win $2,000 total from the 20 times she makes the flush, while only losing $1,000 from the 80 times she doesn't. So over time, the odds pay off. The expert player embraces uncertainty and plays the odds. Her brother, also an expert player, teaches his son the same approach using college acceptance probabilities. Even though outcomes are uncertain, probabilities can guide good decision-making over the long run. A MIT professor studied how people make everyday predictions and forecasts. Even young children can learn new words and concepts from little data by making inferences, unlike computers which need explicit rules and formulas. The professor conducted an experiment analyzing different types of events like movie revenues, lifespans, and baking times. These events follow certain patterns like power law distributions or normal distributions. Most people intuitively understand to apply different types of predictions and probabilities to different situations. But the experiment aimed to explore how people develop this intuition. The key ideas are: expert decision makers use probabilities and play the odds over the long run. People have an intuitive sense of different probabilities and patterns that computers lack. A MIT study explored how people developed this intuitive probabilistic thinking. Researchers Joshua Tenenbaum and Tom Griffiths were interested in how people intuitively learn to make predictions for different kinds of events, like box office grosses, lifespans, poem lengths, congressional careers, and cake baking times. They found that people are able to make surprisingly accurate predictions for these different kinds of events based on very little information, even though they may not be able to articulate the reasoning behind their forecasts. Their predictions tend to match the actual statistical patterns for these events. This ability to intuitively grasp patterns and make predictions is a form of Bayesian reasoning. Bayes' rule uses assumptions and observations to calculate the probabilities of different outcomes. Humans are able to do a form of Bayesian reasoning intuitively without realizing it. However, our intuitions can be skewed if we make incorrect assumptions. For example, students incorrectly assumed Egyptian pharaohs had similar life expectancies to modern leaders, leading them to overestimate pharaoh reign lengths. Our assumptions come from our experiences, but our experiences are often biased toward successes and ignore failures. To develop better predictive abilities, we need to seek out information about failures and disappointments, not just successes. We need to learn from unsuccessful people and events, not just successful ones. This helps us develop more realistic assumptions and intuitions. But exposing ourselves to failures is difficult, as we tend to focus on and remember successes. Some tips for improving your predictive abilities. Ask friends and colleagues about their failures and setbacks, not just their successes. Analyze your own mistakes, disappointments, and bad days, don't just brush them off. Notice failures and struggles, not just triumphs. Expose yourself to unsuccessful businesses, movies that flopped, etc. Question your assumptions and consider alternative possibilities. Don't just rely on optimistic or feel-good intuitions. That covers the key points and advice from the summary on developing better predictive reasoning by learning from failures and examining your assumptions. Please let me know if you have any other questions. Annie Duke, a professional poker player, uses Bayesian thinking and probabilistic reasoning to make decisions at the poker table. In the Tournament of Champions final against Phil Hellmuth, Annie works to change Phil's assumptions about how she plays in order to gain an advantage. She bluffs repeatedly to make Phil think she is reckless and willing to bluff, when in reality she has strong hands. On a key hand, Annie has two pair, kings and nines, but only shows Phil one of her pair, nines, after he folds, reinforcing his view that she is bluffing recklessly. On the next hand, Phil has a pair of tens, but Annie has a slightly better hand with a king to go with her pair of tens. Believing Annie is bluffing again, Phil goes all in and loses the hand and is eliminated. Annie's probabilistic reasoning and ability to envision multiple possible outcomes and scenarios helps her become a world-class poker player and overcome her anxiety issues. By thinking through many possible futures, we can identify what we know and don't know, determine which choices offer the best odds, and make better decisions. While fortune-telling isn't real, we can train ourselves to think probabilistically, see the inherent uncertainty in life, ask ourselves why we were wrong in the past, and make predictions and choices that are based on envisioning and evaluating many possible futures. With practice, we can get better at influencing the likelihood our predictions come true. These principles apply not just to poker, but to many life decisions like choosing a job or retirement planning. The key is working to consider many possible futures, determine which seem most likely, and using that to make the best choice given the information you have. Jerome Robbins, a famous choreographer, approached his friends Leonard Bernstein and Arthur Lawrence with an idea for an innovative musical that integrated different art forms. He wanted to combine ballet, opera, experimental theater, jazz, and modern drama and set it in contemporary New York City. The goal was to establish the avant-garde on Broadway. Robbins was known for pushing creative boundaries in his work and life. He changed his name to escape anti-Semitism and prejudice against his bisexuality. He named names during the McCarthy era out of fear of public backlash. Though despised by some dancers for his bullying perfectionism, he was revered as an influential artist. Robbins's idea for a modern Romeo and Juliet musical was bold. Big-budget musicals at the time followed a standard formula. His vision was an artistic risk. Lawrence wrote a story outline, but progress stalled for years. Robbins's busy schedule and desire for control caused conflicts. Egos and arguments hampered the team. After 4 years, Lawrence connected Bernstein and Robbins, reviving the project. Stephen Sondheim joined to write lyrics. They created the musical West Side Story, which opened to rave reviews. It revolutionized musical theater with its creative integration of dance, music, and story. The risk produced artistic and commercial success. In summary, creative risks, interpersonal conflicts, busy schedules, and control issues initially hampered progress for Robbins's musical vision. But the team eventually collaborated to produce the acclaimed, innovative musical West Side Story after 4 difficult years. Their success shows that fast, original work often requires both creative desperation and the ability to broker harmony among strong, and sometimes clashing, artistic talents. Broadway musicals traditionally followed predictable formulas with spoken dialogue, choruses, dancers, and lavish sets. The stories focused on a male and female lead, with a few duets and little integration of plot, song, and dance. For West Side Story, Jerome Robbins, Leonard Bernstein, and Arthur Lawrence wanted to create something new by combining proven conventions from different art forms in novel ways. To speed up the creative process after years of work, Robbins suggested borrowing from familiar sources like Shakespeare plays and opera but making the elements contemporary. For example, he suggested a wild mambo dance scene for Tony and Maria's first meeting and an operatic quality for their romantic encounter. Robbins pushed his collaborators to avoid cliches and predictable characters. He criticized Lawrence for dividing the story into 3 conventional acts and for making the character Anita too predictable. The researchers Brian Uzzi and Ben Jones analyzed 17.9 million academic papers to determine what makes some especially creative. They found that the most novel and impactful papers typically combined ideas in unusual ways, with about 90% of the content drawing on concepts that had been published before. The pattern they observed, that exceptional creativity relies on combining common ideas in new ways, has been behind many major innovations. Examples include behavioral economics, applying psychology to economics, social networks, using public health models to map social connections, and modern technologies like bike helmets, combining a boat's hull with a helmet structure. Innovation experts have long noted that creatives like Thomas Edison and designers at IDEO have achieved breakthroughs by importing concepts from one domain into another. The power of unusual combinations also applies to finance, product design, and other fields. In summary, the researchers found that conventional knowledge and familiar ideas are the building blocks of creativity. Combining those existing concepts in novel, unexpected ways is the hallmark of highly original thinking. Robbins, one of the creators of West Side Story, was dissatisfied with the original opening scene of the musical. He found it cliched and predictable. He pushed his collaborators to come up with something more creative and emotionally impactful. The new opening number relied entirely on dance to convey the tensions between 2 gangs, the Jets and the Sharks. It was highly innovative, combining ballet, Latin music, and threatening themes. When first performed, the audience was stunned into silence, but then gave the musical a standing ovation. West Side Story went on to become extremely popular and influential. It succeeded by combining conventional and original elements in new ways, putting familiar ideas and experiences in unfamiliar settings. Robbins forced his team to become innovation brokers who imported and exported ideas between different domains. The team making Frozen also aimed to create something new by subverting the standard princess fairy tale. However, after a screening of an early version, they realized their story was not working and they were in trouble. They had ambitious goals to convey a message about sisterly love and female empowerment, but executing on these goals was challenging. The summaries show how creative successes often rely on importing and repurposing ideas from other domains, combining familiar and new elements, and pushing collaborators outside of their comfort zone. But executing on highly ambitious creative visions is difficult and risks failure. Success usually requires persistence in the face of obstacles and doubts. Jennifer Lee, one of the writers of Frozen, joined the movie's team 18 months before its scheduled release. The team struggled to figure out how to portray Anna and Elsa, the 2 sisters, in a likable yet compelling way. They tried various plot lines involving jealousy, revenge, and villains, but none felt authentic. Lee suggested showing how siblings can grow apart due to life's messiness, but then come together again when needed. The team agreed this felt most true and relatable. The team dug deep into their own experiences with siblings to develop Anna and Elsa's relationship. Disney's creative method pushes teams to draw from their emotions and lives to make stories feel real. This can lead to creative breakthroughs, even if born of frustration or anxiety. Months later, songwriters Kristen Anderson Lopez and Bobby Lopez were anxious about writing so many songs for Frozen. While walking and talking about what Elsa's character might feel, Kristen began improvising what became the lyrics for Let It Go. The song conveyed Elsa's journey to let go of expectations and be her true self. When the Frozen team heard Let It Go, they knew it captured the heart of the movie story. It helped them see how to portray Elsa and broke through their creative struggles. The song made Elsa's character relatable. With Let It Go and a vision for Anna and Elsa's relationship, the team figured out the first two-thirds of Frozen. They had overcome major hurdles by drawing on their own experiences. The Disney method and necessity born of deadlines or anxiety had led to a creative breakthrough. The key lessons are: tap into your own experiences, emotions, and life for creative inspiration. Our lives can be raw material for innovation. Frustration or anxiety can spur creative desperation that leads to breakthroughs. Creativity isn't always born of a calm, collected state. Pushing teams out of their comfort zone and habitual ways of thinking can unlock new ideas by forcing them to dig deeper. Constraints and deadlines provide the necessity that is the mother of invention. The filmmakers were stuck and unable to figure out how to end the movie Frozen. They had solved most of the creative challenges but lost the ability to see new options. To shake things up and spur new thinking, Disney executives made a co-director, Jennifer Lee, a director as well. Though a subtle change, it disturbed the team dynamics just enough to generate new ideas. Lee noticed she started listening more closely in her new role. Some animators saw the blizzard as a metaphor for internal struggles. Others wanted more emotional depth. Lee realized they needed to slow the pace, focus on the sisters' relationship, and have their love for each other, not romantic love, save the day. The intermediate disturbance hypothesis suggests that creativity flourishes when there are small disruptions to the status quo, like the co-director's promotion. If there are no disturbances or massive disruptions, creativity is stifled. But the right amount of disturbance allows new ideas to emerge, just as occasional storms or tree falls in a rainforest create opportunities for new life. In summary, the filmmakers were stuck creatively until a small disruption to the team, promoting a co-director, allowed new ideas to emerge and the ending to fall into place. Creativity requires novelty, surprise, and other unpredictable elements. While the creative process can be cultivated, creativity itself cannot be reduced to a formula. To increase your own creativity, pay attention to your experiences and emotions. Use them as source material to generate new ideas. Steve Jobs said the best designers are those who have thought deeply about their own experiences. The Disney creative process also encourages looking inward to find emotions and experiences that bring characters to life. Embrace the anxiety and stress of the creative process. They push us to see ideas in new ways and make unexpected connections. The pain of creativity is necessary, it leads to breakthroughs. Maintain distance from your creations and subject them to self-criticism. Without tension and alternative perspectives, one idea can crowd out competitors. Force yourself to critique what you've made and look at it differently. Change power dynamics. Get new input. Brokers, or people with diverse knowledge and experiences, tend to be more creative because they can combine ideas in new ways. To become a broker, pay attention to how different ideas and experiences make you think and feel. Mix and match them to generate new possibilities. A little disturbance or shakeup can jolt us out of routine thinking patterns and make creativity more likely. But the disturbance must be the right size and scope. Too much chaos inhibits creativity. The example of Frozen's creative process illustrates these principles. The team struggled through many anxieties, tensions, and differences of opinion. But maintaining distance, mixing new input, looking inward, and embracing the pain of the process ultimately led to a remarkably innovative result in the form of a fresh take on the Disney fairy tale. The directors acted as brokers, combining their diverse experiences to find an ending focused on the power of sacrifice and love over fear. South Avondale Elementary School in Cincinnati was historically one of the worst performing schools in the city and state. Despite receiving millions of dollars in funding and resources, students continued to perform poorly. In 2008, Cincinnati Public Schools launched the Elementary Initiative to target low-performing schools like South Avondale. The initiative did not provide more funding or resources. Instead, it aimed to change how teachers use data to make decisions. Initially, South Avondale teachers rarely used the data and dashboards provided by the district. The elementary initiative required teachers to interact with data by hand, transcribing test scores onto index cards and drawing graphs on butcher paper. This disfluent approach, while cumbersome, forced teachers to deeply engage with and understand the data. Within 2 years, South Avondale's test scores and performance drastically improved. Researchers attributed the success to the development of a data-driven culture. The turnaround shows that simply having access to information is not enough. Teachers and schools must put in the work to truly understand data and turn it into actionable knowledge. The elementary initiative succeeded by transforming how South Avondale teachers thought about and used data. In summary, the key to South Avondale's success was not the amount of data available, but rather how teachers were required to interact with and understand that data. Forcing teachers out of their habitual ways of thinking and into a disfluent approach enabled them to gain insights and make better decisions, ultimately driving major improvements at a once failing school. Information is becoming increasingly abundant in our daily lives due to technology like smartphones, websites, software, and apps. While this information can be useful if utilized properly, our ability to gain insight from it has not kept up. This is known as information blindness. A study of 401k enrollment found that as the number of options increased, participation dropped. At 2 options, 75% enrolled. At 30 options, 65% enrolled. At 60 options, only 53% enrolled. The large amount of information overwhelmed people and led them to make poor choices or no choice at all. Information blindness occurs because our brains have evolved to break down information into smaller, more digestible pieces through a process known as scaffolding. We create mental file folders and subfolders to store and access information. When faced with too much information, we struggle to organize and understand it, so we may ignore it altogether. One way to overcome information blindness is to create disfluency by engaging with the information through questions, comparisons, spreadsheets, and other means. This forces us to grapple with the information in chunks we can understand. Even small efforts to manipulate information in this way can help us gain insight. A Chase Manhattan Bank study found one group of debt collectors in Tampa outperformed others. Their manager, Charlotte Flood, had them create disfluency by analyzing information on debtors and developing tailored approaches for each call. Though the information was abundant, engaging with it led to much better outcomes. In summary, while we have more access to information than ever before, we often struggle to gain insight from it due to information blindness. Creating disfluency by actively engaging with and manipulating the information in an organized fashion is key to overcoming this challenge. When we put in the work to understand information, we can leverage it to make better choices and gain useful knowledge. Charlotte Flood is a debt collection manager at J.P. Morgan Chase who came up as a debt collector herself. Despite overseeing some of the hardest accounts to collect from, her group has the highest collection rates and employee satisfaction. Flood was asked to speak at a company conference about her tactics. Her suggestions seemed logical but were too complex for the average debt collector to implement. To understand her methods, Chase hired consultants. Flood showed the consultants her calendar, binders filled with notes, numbers, and printouts from each day of calling. Her team comes up with hypotheses about what might work, tests them, tracks the results, and discusses what they've learned. This helps them become very sensitive to patterns and information. The consultants realized Flood was using the scientific method to isolate variables and understand causality. But she was also helping her team interact with the data from each call in a way that made it easier to learn. By proposing theories and experiments, they were adding an element of difficulty that helped them absorb more information. The example of Nancy Johnson shows how this method of interacting with information to generate hypotheses and run experiments can work in other fields. As a new 4th grade teacher, Johnson struggled at first but improved dramatically by adopting an experimental mindset. She came up with theories about what might help her students learn and tested them to see what worked, tracking data to determine effectiveness. This helped her become a much more effective teacher. The overall point is that generating theories or hypotheses and testing them is a powerful way to learn. It helps us do something with the information we receive so we can absorb and understand it better. We become sensitive to patterns we might otherwise miss. This experimental, scientific approach can work in many areas of life and work. Delia Morris was a high school student in Cincinnati. Her family experienced homelessness after her father lost his job and got into a fight with their landlord. Though Delia was a gifted student, her teachers worried that poverty and instability might derail her chances of going to college. In 2009, Cincinnati began expanding its education reforms to high schools. However, early results were disappointing as teachers said high school students were too hardened for interventions like data rooms to be effective. They argued that high schools needed to help students with major life decisions like going to college, having a baby, or helping family. In response, the school district created engineering classes in partnership with local universities. The goal was to teach students a multidisciplinary approach to education that encourages students to leverage the technology they use in their daily lives to solve real-world problems. Though 90% of students at Western Hills High lived in poverty, the school offered courses on decision-making and problem-solving. Delia signed up for an engineering course taught by Dion Edwards. He told students, "We're going to learn how to think like scientists. We're going to leave your parents and friends behind and learn to make choices with clear eyes, without the baggage everyone wants to put on you." The focus of the class was the engineering design process, which taught students how to define problems, collect data, brainstorm solutions, evaluate options, and test different approaches. Overall, the summary shows how Cincinnati's education reforms evolved to meet the needs of high school students in poverty. Though earlier interventions were unsuccessful, the engineering and decision-making courses aimed to give students critical thinking skills to help them overcome challenges and open up more opportunities. Delia's story illustrates the potential impact of these types of programs. The engineering design process is a systematic method for solving problems. It involves breaking down a complex problem into smaller, more manageable components. Students follow a series of steps: define the problem, conduct research, brainstorm solutions, test and evaluate options, and repeat until a solution is found. Delia, a high school student, used the engineering design process to determine whether she should babysit her newborn niece after school. She gathered data by considering her experiences and the experiences of her sisters, and predicting how babysitting would impact her schedule and priorities. After analyzing the data, she concluded that babysitting was not a minor commitment and would negatively affect her schoolwork and future plans. She reframed the decision from helping her family versus letting them down, to choosing between helping now versus helping in bigger ways later through her education. Research shows that the way decisions are framed can significantly impact people's choices and ability to consider alternative perspectives. Once someone adopts an initial frame, it can be difficult to see the issue differently. Systems like the engineering design process can help overcome this by facilitating a reframe. They provide a structured series of steps to make a familiar choice seem unfamiliar. According to experts, framing and reframing choices is an important skill, especially for young people, because it helps them learn from experiences and make better decisions. Delia's ability to reframe whether to babysit using the engineering design process allowed her to convey her reasoning to her father and find an alternative solution that supported her education and future goals. As a senior, Delia faced increasing challenges at home, including lack of stable housing, heat, and electricity at times. However, with the support of her teachers, she maintained excellent grades, demonstrating resilience and strong decision-making skills. Delia, a high school student, received a lot of support from her teachers, especially her English teacher Ms. Thole and science teacher Mr. Edwards. They recognized her potential and helped her in many ways, including helping with college applications and scholarships. With their support, Delia won many scholarships and was able to enroll at the University of Cincinnati. College has been challenging for Delia as she is often the only woman or only black student in her classes. However, the university set up a program called Gen 1 to provide extra support for first-generation college students like Delia. Delia has found Mr. Edwards' problem-solving techniques very helpful for dealing with challenges and staying in control. Researchers have found that introducing obstacles or difficulties in learning, known as disfluency, can actually help with learning and understanding. For example, students who take notes by hand tend to learn and remember more than those who take notes on a laptop. Forcing ourselves to engage with and apply new information, rather than just passively receiving it, enhances our learning and ability to use the information. Dante Williams, a student at Delia's former elementary school, has benefited from the school's reforms and support. At his 5th grade graduation, 86% of students exceeded state education standards. The school's success is due to dedicated teachers, focused principals, and parents working together to use data to understand students' needs. At his graduation, Dante was given a diploma to fill in his name, symbolizing how education empowers individuals to shape their own futures. Overall, the key ideas are: support from dedicated teachers and mentors can make a huge difference in students' lives. Introducing difficulties and obstacles in learning processes enhances understanding and learning. We learn better when we actively engage with and apply information. Using data to gain insight into people's needs and strengths enables the design of effective solutions and interventions. Success comes from many forces working together around a common purpose. Education and access to information empower individuals to shape their own futures. The author struggled with self-motivation and procrastination in the evenings when faced with various tasks like responding to emails, writing, and household chores. The key insights from research on motivation and goal setting helped address this. Motivation becomes easier when we transform a chore into a choice, which gives us a sense of control. The author would start replying to emails by typing any sentence to get going, which made it feel more like a choice and amplified their internal locus of control. Motivation is also triggered by seeing our choices as affirmations of our deeper values and goals. The author would write down why a task like reading studies mattered to remind themselves of the bigger picture. Setting a stretch goal sparks big ambitions, while SMART goals help form a concrete plan. The author set a stretch goal to find an aviation story on mental models, then developed SMART subgoals to achieve it, like calling 4 experts per day. SMART goals provide specifics, measurability, achievability, realism, and timelines. We aid our focus by building mental models of what we expect. The author envisioned what their workdays should look like to stay focused on their goals. They imagined potential distractions and their responses, priming their mind to notice those things. In summary, the insights on motivation, goal setting, and focus helped the author overcome procrastination and make progress on important long-term goals like writing a book. Transforming chores into choices, connecting tasks to values, setting ambitious yet concrete goals, and priming focus with mental models were key strategies for success. The key is to envision what you want to accomplish and develop a mental model to stay focused. Some techniques to do this. Choose 3 to 4 things you want to accomplish and ask yourself questions about them. This helps you develop a story in your mind about how things should proceed. When distractions arise, it's easier to decide whether to ignore them or not based on this mental model. Have a stretch goal and a SMART goal to give you a plan and vision of how things should unfold. This makes it easier to decide where to focus your attention. Envision multiple potential futures and determine which are most likely to happen. Then you can influence which future actually occurs by the choices you make. This helps with decision making. For bigger decisions, write out potential futures in detail and assign rough probabilities to each one based on research and expert input. Then let your Bayesian instincts guide you to the best choice. You can get better at this over time through experience. Manage teams by focusing on the how of the team dynamics and environment, not just the people. Build psychological safety by encouraging equal speaking, listening to each other, and showing sensitivity to how others feel. For managing others, give them more decision-making authority and show you are committed to their success. This leads to more motivation, innovation, and productivity. To encourage innovation, pay attention to your experiences and reactions, recognize that anxiety amid the creative process is normal and can lead to new insights, and critique your ideas from new perspectives to avoid blind spots. To absorb information better, do something with the information like explaining it to someone else, writing a summary, graphing data, testing an idea, etc. This turns information into learning and insights. The key to productivity is recognizing choices that lead to different ways of thinking. Productive people make deliberate choices that others ignore. Productivity comes from pushing yourself to think differently. The author describes a patient who, after suffering damage to her basal ganglia from a stroke, lost her motivation and ability to experience pleasure, a condition known as athymormia. The basal ganglia, and in particular the striatum, are responsible for regulating motivation, mood, movement, and reward processing. Damage to these areas can lead to deficits in motivation, cognition, motor skills, and the ability to experience pleasure. The patient described in the opening of the chapter suffered damage to her basal ganglia, particularly the globus pallidi, leading to a frontal lobe syndrome and loss of motivation. By understanding how damage to these areas influences behavior and motivation, we can gain insight into how these systems work in healthy individuals. Here is a summary of the key points. Research on Parkinson's disease and brain imaging studies show that the striatum, a region in the brain's basal ganglia, is involved in processing rewards, anticipation, excitement, and motivation. Damage to the striatum can impair these functions. Experiments by Mauricio Delgado and colleagues showed that activity in the striatum increases when people anticipate and receive monetary rewards for correct guesses in a game. The striatum also differentiates between rewards and penalties. This suggests the striatum is involved in coding the value and expectations of outcomes. Follow-up experiments by Delgado and others demonstrated that people prefer having choices and control over outcomes, even if the outcomes themselves are the same. The striatum is more active when people feel in control or like they can influence outcomes. This indicates that choice and autonomy themselves activate reward circuitry in the brain. A sense of control and autonomy has many psychological benefits. It leads to greater motivation, persistence, and resilience in the face of setbacks. It is also associated with living longer and healthier lives. Infants as young as 3 months old prefer having control and autonomy over their environment. Several studies show that when people are given choices, their intrinsic motivation increases, as does their performance, creativity, and satisfaction. This is because choice enhances feelings of autonomy and self-determination, which in turn activates the brain's reward circuitry. In summary, the capacity to make meaningful choices and exercise control over one's environment and outcomes appears to tap into primal reward circuitry in the human brain. This innate drive for autonomy and self-determination fuels motivation, well-being, and performance. The study of rewards and motivation has a long history in psychology. Early research by Edward Deci and others in the 1970s found that extrinsic rewards like money can undermine intrinsic motivation for activities that people find interesting and enjoyable. However, subsequent research has provided a more nuanced understanding. Factors like the type of reward, the context, and individuals' perceptions seem to influence whether and how rewards impact motivation. For example, verbal rewards and praise tend to enhance intrinsic motivation, especially when they convey a sense of competence and self-determination. Choice also seems to boost motivation, as people feel more autonomous and empowered when able to choose their activities or rewards. However, tangible rewards like money can be detrimental if they make an activity feel like an obligation or means to an end rather than enjoyable in itself. Context also matters, as any negative effects of rewards tend to be lessened when the rewards are unexpected or feel deserved. Individual differences play a role as well. Those with an internal locus of control, who believe they are in control of events in their lives, may be more intrinsically motivated and respond better to choice. An internal locus of control can be especially adaptive in difficult or stressful situations. On the other hand, an external locus of control, where one believes outside forces control events, is linked to lower motivation and well-being. People can shift their locus of control, often becoming more internal through experiences where they are able to exercise agency and power over meaningful outcomes. In summary, research on motivation and rewards suggests a balanced approach that incorporates factors like praise, choice, and opportunities to build competence and autonomy. While tangible rewards should be used judiciously, they can have a place when tied closely to performance, deserved, and not the sole motivator. Individuals with a more internal locus of control may be well suited to more autonomous and self-directed situations. But locus of control can be developed, highlighting the importance of empowering and mastery experiences for motivation and well-being. The U.S. Marine Corps' Crucible event helps instill core values and build teamwork in new recruits. During the 54-hour Crucible, recruits must work together in teams to overcome 24 challenging obstacles and stations. They also participate in discussions on core values and 2 nighttime endurance events. No part of the Crucible can be completed alone. The event culminates in a 16-kilometer hike, after which recruits earn the title of Marine. A key part of the Crucible is overcoming obstacles through teamwork. Recruits must rely on each other and function as a cohesive unit to accomplish each station. The combination of physical, mental, and team-building challenges helps transform recruits into Marines. The shared hardship also builds camaraderie and contributes to strong peer bonds. The team-centric nature of the Crucible underscores the Marine Corps' emphasis on teamwork, trust, and a shared identity. Recruits who complete the Crucible develop confidence in themselves and their fellow Marines. This transformation highlights the power of teams to achieve difficult goals through cooperation, trust, and resilience. Here is a summary of the key points. Norms are the formal and informal rules that govern group behavior. They dictate how group members should think, feel, and act. Groups develop norms through interaction and shared experiences. Norms emerge to guide behavior in a way that meets group members' needs and goals. They help coordinate group activities and facilitate cooperation. Once established, norms are enforced through rewards for compliance and punishments for deviance. Group members put pressure on each other to follow the norms. Compliance is motivated by a desire to gain group acceptance and avoid rejection. Norms can be constructive or destructive. Constructive norms promote cooperation, learning, and high performance. Destructive norms lead to poor outcomes by discouraging open communication and risk-taking. Groups must reconstruct harmful norms to become high-functioning. Group norms develop through an emergence process, not a linear progression. They are shaped by the interactions of group members as they negotiate a shared understanding of appropriate attitudes and behaviors. Leaders play an important role in norm development by modeling desired behaviors and communicating expectations. The Saturday Night Live case study shows how intense bonding and psychological safety among group members can enable the emergence of constructive norms that support creativity, learning, and performance. The writers and cast dealt with the uncertainty and risk of a new show by relying on each other for support rather than punishment. They encouraged experimentation through acceptance of failures and a willingness to challenge each other in a spirit of fun. In contrast, the group norm examples from hospitals illustrate how norms can also emerge in a way that is counterproductive. A culture of avoiding mistakes and failure to report errors prevented learning and performance improvement. Management intervention was needed to reconstruct the norms. Amy Edmondson's research has been instrumental in identifying psychological safety as a key factor enabling constructive group norms and learning behavior. Her work highlights the role of leadership in fostering an environment where people feel comfortable engaging in learning and performance behaviors. Air France Flight 447 crashed into the Atlantic Ocean in 2009, killing all 228 passengers and crew on board. The flight was traveling from Rio de Janeiro to Paris. The crash was primarily due to pilot error. The pilots became confused and disoriented after the plane's speed sensors malfunctioned and froze over, providing incorrect speed data. The pilots struggled to determine the plane's actual speed and correct its trajectory. The pilots had little experience flying at high altitude in dangerous weather conditions. 2 of the 3 pilots had never received advanced upset recovery training. They failed to recognize that the plane had stalled, and they made incorrect control inputs that caused it to descend at a high rate of speed. The cockpit voice recorder captured the pilots' confusion, along with warnings from the plane stall warning system. The pilots seemed unaware the plane was stalling and losing altitude for over 3 minutes. By the time they realized the plane was descending, it was too late to recover. Issues with the plane's speed sensors had been known for years but were deemed low risk. Airbus and Air France failed to warn pilots about the potential dangers of speed sensor malfunctions at high altitude. The crash highlighted issues around lack of pilot experience, training, and familiarity with advanced automated systems. It prompted changes in pilot training standards worldwide, with a new focus on manual flying skills, high-altitude handling, and upset recovery. The loss of Flight 447 was tragic and preventable. Multiple systemic failures and an unfortunate combination of events led to the crash, but at its core, it demonstrated the fallibility of human cognition in a complex environment. With more robust training and support systems in place, the outcome could have been different. Does this summary accurately reflect the key details and events around the crash of Air France Flight 447? Let me know if you would like me to clarify or expand the summary in any way. The official report on the crash of Air France Flight 447 was published by the BEA, the French Aviation Accident Investigation Agency. Air France directed inquiries to that report. The flight crew originally included a flight engineer to monitor systems, but modern aircraft like the A330 have eliminated that role, assigning those responsibilities to the pilots. Long-haul flights also carry relief pilots. The crash of Flight 447 followed a series of errors by the flight crew in response to the plane's automatic stall prevention systems. The plane climbed rapidly, then stalled and crashed. All 228 passengers and crew were killed. Automated systems have reduced human errors, but have also reduced human vigilance and the development of manual flying skills. Humans are prone to be overly reliant on automation and to experience attentional tunneling in stressful situations. The pilots of Flight 447 appear to have become confused and reacted improperly as the plane's automated systems issued confusing information. They failed to properly diagnose and correct the stall. Experience and training are required for humans to monitor automated systems effectively and avoid automation-induced complacency. Developing an appropriate balance of human and machine input is challenging. The crash of Flight 447 illustrates the potential consequences when human operators are unable to properly monitor and intervene in the operation of highly automated systems. Both technical and human factors were found to contribute to this accident. Reactive thinking in response to a crisis can lead to poor decision-making. More complex, deliberative thinking is required, especially when dealing with automated systems. But this type of thinking is difficult when people are under stress and perceive time pressure. The design of Flight 447's automated systems and interfaces was found to be confusing and inadequate, contributing to the pilot's inability to properly diagnose and recover from the stall. More intuitive system designs may help avoid such errors. That covers the key points from the summary regarding the official report on the Air France Flight 447 accident and issues of human-automation interaction. The study examined how experienced nurses in a neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, make critical decisions under time pressure. Researchers interviewed nurses about specific incidents where they had to make quick judgments and take action. In one example, an experienced nurse named Darlene noticed that a baby she was overseeing did not look right. The baby's color was off, its belly was rounded, and a minor procedure was still bleeding excessively. Darlene immediately got the doctor, who started treating the baby for sepsis. Darlene's trainee had missed the signs that the baby was in distress. Experienced nurses like Darlene build mental models through years of practice that allow them to quickly recognize patterns and see problems. They recognize clusters of cues that novices miss. Their intuitive judgments are based on this accrued experience. While people often create narratives to explain events retrospectively, Darlene immediately saw that the baby was in trouble. She did not have to piece the situation together. She instantly recognized the pattern from her extensive experience. Her story demonstrates the difference in how experts and novices perceive and understand situations. Experts do not consciously reflect on all their accumulated experiences. Instead, those experiences coalesce into a sense of what is typical or expected. When deviations from that expectation are detected, experts can react very quickly. For Darlene, the combination of a bloody bandage, dropping temperature, swollen belly, and sleepiness signaled that the baby had sepsis, allowing her to get immediate help. Novices, lacking that experiential base, may react to surface features without seeing the deeper connections or recognizing subtle deviations that indicate a problem. Darlene's trainee had tried to address the falling temperature without seeing it as part of a bigger issue. Experts' pattern recognition allows for faster, more accurate situation assessments and decision-making. Does this summary accurately reflect the key details and main takeaways from the materials? Let me know if you would like me to clarify or expand on any part of the summary. Captain Richard de Crespigny and his co-pilots encountered an uncontained engine failure on their Airbus A380, triggering a cascade of warnings and alarms. However, de Crespigny was able to remain calm and focus on landing the massive aircraft safely in Singapore. Experts say de Crespigny succeeded by shifting his focus from what was going wrong to what was still working. This helped simplify the situation cognitively and allowed him to decide how to achieve what needed to be done. Pilots are taught this mindset helps in emergency situations, narrowing his attention to the most critical issues, while also periodically broadening his attention to ensure he had the full, accurate picture of the situation and could track the overall status of the aircraft. Good pilots constantly reassess actions, effectiveness, and next steps, mentally practicing emergency scenarios to build models they can use if a real crisis arises. De Crespigny likened it to a chess player anticipating various moves and countermoves. Through practice, the scenarios become more instinctual. Leveraging crew resource management by delegating to and communicating with his co-pilots and getting help from all available resources. No one person can handle such a complex situation alone. Staying focused on the goal, to land the plane safely. By not becoming distracted or overwhelmed by the alarms and warnings, de Crespigny was able to steer the aircraft back to Singapore Changi Airport and land, saving the lives of all aboard. The key factors in the successful outcome were preparation, practice, calmness, communication, and maintaining a clear goal to get passengers and crew on the ground secure. De Crespigny demonstrated the life-saving power of experience, mental readiness, and effective teamwork. In the early 1980s, General Electric was struggling with bureaucracy and inefficiency. Jack Welch became CEO in 1981 and embarked on a massive restructuring and transformation of the company. One of Welch's key strategies was to make GE's divisions more competitive and productive by giving them clear performance goals. He implemented a system where each division had to be first or second in its market. Those that were not were fixed, sold, or closed. This forced GE's managers to set ambitious targets and work relentlessly to achieve them. Welch believed that overly vague or easy goals did not sufficiently motivate people or push them outside their comfort zone. Difficult, concrete goals gave people a quantified outside to strive for. Goals also provided focus, coordinated efforts, and gave people feedback on progress. The new system was not easy, and many managers objected to the constant pressure. But over time, it led to huge gains in productivity, quality, and innovation. GE became a much more agile company that delivered strong, consistent profits. Key lessons from Welch's approach to goal setting at GE. Set challenging, quantifiable goals. Ambitious targets push people out of their comfort zone and drive real change. Tie goals to performance assessment and consequences. If goals are optional or there are no consequences for missing targets, they lose much of their motivational power. Get buy-in at all levels. For goals to be truly motivational, the people responsible for achieving them must believe in and commit to those goals. Address objections and concerns to build commitment. Continually monitor progress. Regular feedback and check-ins help identify obstacles, make corrections, and maintain focus and progress. Failure to meet goals must be addressed, not ignored. Be flexible in strategies but steadfast in goals. The path to achieving difficult goals is rarely straightforward. People need flexibility and support in determining the best strategies and approaches, but the goals themselves should not change easily. That covers the key highlights from Welch's approach to using goal setting to motivate and transform GE. Jack Welch became CEO of General Electric in 1981 and transformed the company through practices like workouts, goal setting, and speed. Workouts were participative meetings where employees at all levels could suggest and discuss business improvements. Welch aimed to make GE faster and more nimble through workouts. Goal setting was also key to Welch's vision. According to leadership expert Gary Latham, the best way to set goals is by making them specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART. Latham found that participatively set goals lead to better performance than assigned goals. Welch had GE units set aggressive growth targets through a participative process. Speed was a key value for Welch. He pushed GE leaders and units to move faster in anticipating and responding to change. Workouts and goal setting were meant to increase speed. Welch learned about speed from Japan's bullet train, which was developed through a participative process to improve service. GE workout facilitator Steve Kerr helped leaders conduct participative meetings. He advised them to consider all ideas and explain why some were rejected. Kerr said great ideas could come from anywhere. Welch embraced this philosophy and sought broad input to improve GE. Through participative management, ambitious goals, and a focus on speed, Welch transformed GE into a more innovative and productive company. His leadership practices and values shaped management thinking well beyond GE. The summary highlights Welch's key initiatives like workouts and goal setting to increase participation, ambition, and speed at GE. It notes the influences on Welch's thinking, including consultant Gary Latham on goal setting and the example of Japan's bullet train. The transformative impact of Welch's leadership on GE and beyond is also highlighted. In April 2014, a gang led by Kelvin Melton, an inmate at a North Carolina prison, kidnapped Frank Jansen, the father of Wake County Assistant District Attorney Colleen Jansen. The kidnappers went to the wrong address and took Frank Jansen instead of Colleen Jansen. The kidnappers held Frank Jansen captive for 5 days. They called Colleen Jansen and demanded a ransom for his release. The FBI tracked the calls and located where Frank Jansen was being held. They rescued him during a confrontation with the kidnappers. Melton, an established high-ranking member of the Bloods gang, had obtained contraband cell phones in prison. From his cell, he organized Frank Jansen's kidnapping using a network of associates outside the prison. The kidnapping was meant to intimidate Colleen Jansen in retaliation for her prosecution of gang members. 8 other suspects were charged in the kidnapping plot in addition to Melton. The Jansen family did not speak publicly about the ordeal. The FBI declined to provide details about the rescue operation that freed Frank Jansen. The case highlighted the threat of unauthorized cell phone use in prisons and the ability of gang leaders to continue orchestrating criminal plans even from behind bars. Melton was able to remotely organize a sophisticated kidnapping plot that terrorized his target's family. In sum, Kelvin Melton, an imprisoned gang leader, masterminded the kidnapping of a prosecutor's father using an illegal cell phone. The FBI rescued the victim after 5 days of captivity. The brazen crime revealed how tech-savvy gangs and their incarcerated leaders can continue threatening communities even from prison. In 1984, General Motors and Toyota formed a joint venture called New United Motor Manufacturing Incorporated, NUMMI, to operate an auto plant in Fremont, California. The plant had previously been operated by GM alone, but had a reputation for poor quality and labor problems. Under the joint venture, Toyota brought its lean manufacturing and quality control techniques to the plant. After rehiring many former GM employees, Nummi was able to significantly improve productivity and quality. Rick Madrid was a former gang member and felon who got a job at Nummi and helped implement Toyota's system. He covered his tattoos and embraced the company's focus on teamwork and continuous improvement. With Nummi's success, Madrid became a celebrated example of its transformative impact. In 2009, GM pulled out of the joint venture during its bankruptcy. Toyota decided to close the plant a few months later. The closure marked the end of Nummi, which had become an important landmark in the development of lean manufacturing and helped revitalize American manufacturing. Its effective techniques have been studied and imitated around the world. The summary is drawn from multiple news reports from the 1980s through 2010, including accounts of former employees. It describes how the joint venture turned around a troubled factory and details Rick Madrid's role in helping introduce Toyota's innovative management system. The closure of the plant marked the end of this influential operation. The key events in the summary are: GM and Toyota formed Nummi joint venture in 1984 to take over troubled GM plant. Toyota brings lean manufacturing and quality control, improving productivity and quality. Rick Madrid, a former felon, helps implement Toyota's system and becomes celebrated example of Nummi's success. GM pulls out of Nummi in 2009. Toyota closes plant shortly thereafter. Nummi becomes landmark in lean manufacturing and revitalizing U.S. auto industry. Techniques widely studied and imitated. Nummi was a joint venture between Toyota and GM from 1984 to 2010. It proved that Japanese lean manufacturing techniques could be combined with American labor practices. For Toyota, Nummi was an experiment to see if the Toyota production system could work in America. For GM, it was a way to learn lean manufacturing and build small cars profitably. Researchers studied Nummi as part of a broader study of nearly 200 tech startups in Silicon Valley. They found that companies tended to follow one of 5 organizational blueprints at founding. Nummi followed a commitment model that valued long-term relationships. Nummi's model led to job security, shared decision-making between managers and workers, and joint efforts to improve productivity and quality. This built trust and a culture where people felt devoted to each other. Nummi is viewed as a model of how companies can empower workers and build a collaborative culture. However, it was tied to the fortunes of the auto industry and eventually closed in 2010. The summary highlights how Nummi's success showed the potential of lean manufacturing combined with empowering workers. But it also notes the challenges of applying and sustaining the model and how it was ultimately subject to larger economic forces. In 2004, Annie Duke participated in the Tournament of Champions, a winner-take-all poker tournament with a $2 million prize. Early on, Duke won a key hand against Howard Lederer that gave her a chip advantage. In another hand, Lederer tried to bluff Duke out of a pot by betting big on a weak hand, but Duke called his bluff. As the tournament progressed, Duke focused on accumulating chips through small pots instead of big confrontations. She tried to make optimal decisions on each hand by calculating the pot odds, the ratio of money in the pot to money required to call a bet, the implied odds, the potential money she could win, her position, her hand strength, her opponent's strategies, and her table image. By the final table, Duke had a dominant chip lead. On the final hand, Duke and Phil Hellmuth were the last 2 players remaining. Duke had a queen and 9 of clubs, a decent but not invincible hand. Hellmuth raised before the flop, and Duke called. The flop came 10 of clubs, 4 of clubs, king of spades, giving Duke a flush draw and a straight draw. Hellmuth bet $100,000. Duke calculated that she needed to call $100,000 to possibly win the $450,000 in the pot, giving her more than 4-to-1 pot odds, so she called. The turn was the 3 of clubs, giving Duke the flush. Hellmuth bet $200,000. Duke decided to just call again, wanting Hellmuth to keep betting. On the river, the final card was the Jack of Spades, which didn't help Hellmuth. He bet $500,000. Duke went all in, and Helmuth called. Duke showed her flush, Helmuth didn't have one, and Duke won the tournament. Through careful decision-making, Duke overcame tough competition and her own self-doubts to become the first female poker player to win an open tournament against top professionals. Her victory demonstrated that poker is a game of skill, not just luck. With the right strategy and mindset, anyone, regardless of gender, can become a champion. Here's a summary of the key points. Annie Duke is a professional poker player known for her mathematical and strategic approach to the game. She earned a degree in cognitive psychology from Columbia University. In the 2004 World Series of Poker, Duke made a daring call against Greg Raymer that resulted in her eliminating him and advancing to the finals. The call demonstrated her ability to calculate odds and make difficult decisions under pressure. Duke was involved in the Good Judgment Project, an experiment run by Philip Tetlock to see if experts could forecast geopolitical events more accurately than regular people. The project found that regular participants who received training in probabilistic reasoning and overcoming cognitive biases performed as well as subject matter experts. Duke's experience demonstrates how skills from poker, like calculating odds and making judgments under uncertainty, can apply to other domains. In poker, players must calculate the odds that certain hands will win in order to make optimal betting decisions. If the odds of winning a hand are less than the pot odds, the ratio of the amount currently in the pot to the amount required to call, a player should usually fold. Professional players work to put themselves in positions where the odds favor them over time. Poker requires managing uncertainty and imperfect information. Even when the odds slightly favor calling a bet, there is always a chance of losing. Professionals must accept losses as inevitable and focus on making the most statistically justified choice on each hand. Over many hands, small edges in odds will translate to profits. For amateurs, the psychological challenges of losing hands and dealing with uncertainty often prove more difficult than the mathematical aspects of the game. Professionals are distinguished by their discipline and ability to remain detached from short-term outcomes. They make their strategy working for them by consistent, high-quality decision-making, not by trying to control chance events within any single hand. The summary covers Duke's background, the key concepts related to odds and probability in poker, the psychological elements of the game, and Duke's approach as an expert player. The assistant synthesizes details from multiple sources to provide a high-level overview of these topics. Frozen, Disney's animated film released in 2013, was a massive commercial and critical success that revitalized the studio's animation arm. The film went through many iterations over more than a decade of development. Early versions focused on more faithful adaptations of the Snow Queen fairy tale, but they never came together cohesively. Jennifer Lee, a writer on the film, suggested making the Snow Queen Elsa into a more complex character by making her powers a gift that she struggles to control. This simple but powerful idea helped the creative team unlock the story. The songs in the film, especially Let It Go, were also pivotal. The songwriters, Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez, wrote 25 songs for the film before Let It Go emerged and reshaped the story. An innovative animation tool called Tonic allowed animators to create realistic snow effects and environments. New rendering capabilities also allowed for photorealistic snow and ice. Co-director Chris Buck cited the relationship between the two sisters, Anna and Elsa, as the heart of the story that resonated most with audiences. The success of Frozen showed how important innovation and perseverance were to reviving Disney's animation success. Through trial and error and openness to new ideas, the film was able to become a massive pop culture phenomenon. Here's a summary of the sources. Frozen, released in 2013, was directed by Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee, the first woman to direct a Disney animated film. Lee was brought on late in the process to rewrite the script. The film went through many revisions in a process overseen by Disney Animation Story Trust. Lee and Buck had to make significant changes to characters, storylines, songs, and more in response to feedback. They described the process as difficult but leading to a better film. Lee and Buck came from different backgrounds. Buck had a long career at Disney, while Lee started as a screenwriter. They had to learn to collaborate and direct together. The story of Frozen's development is typical of Disney's animation process under John Lasseter and Ed Catmull, involving extensive reworking and feedback. Multiple sources emphasize that this process of experimentation, exploration, and discovery is standard for Disney films. Frozen's success, especially in appealing to both boys and girls, was influenced by Lee's perspective as a woman. Lee aimed to create complex, relatable female characters. The music for Frozen was written by Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez, a husband-wife team. They had collaborated before and drew on their own relationship experiences in writing the songs. The development of West Side Story in the 1950s, which combined ballet, jazz, and musical theater styles, provides historical context for Frozen's creative fusion of genres. West Side Story was directed and choreographed by Jerome Robbins, with music by Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim. Its creation involved collaboration and conflict that ultimately produced a hit show. Research by Brian Uzzi and colleagues found that innovators who combine conventional and atypical partners, as in the West Side Story and Frozen teams, tend to have a higher impact, though the partnerships can be more difficult to sustain. Diverse, interdisciplinary teams may achieve outcomes greater than the sum of their parts. The summary covers the key details around Frozen's development, including the perspectives of Jennifer Lee and Chris Buck, Disney Animation's creative process, the role of the music team, the historical comparison to West Side Story, and relevant research on collaboration. Here is a summary of the key ideas. Teams and collaboration are crucial for creativity and innovation. Bringing together diverse perspectives and areas of expertise leads to new combinations of ideas that individuals alone are unlikely to generate. However, effective teamwork and collaboration are challenging to achieve. Several factors are important. Network connections. Teams need connections that span disciplinary, organizational, and social boundaries. These structural holes expose team members to new ideas and facilitate the flow of knowledge. Individuals who can broker connections across these holes, technology brokers, are especially valuable. Psychological safety. Team members need to feel safe to share unconventional ideas, ask questions, and make mistakes. Management needs to create an environment where people feel their input is truly valued. Balancing constraints and freedom. Teams work best when given clear direction and deadlines to provoke progress, but also enough freedom and autonomy to explore new directions. Management needs to push teams without instilling too much fear of failure. Drawing on life experiences, individuals often get their best insights by relating problems to their own experiences. Teams should encourage members to share life stories and draw analogies to stimulate new ideas. Some of the most creative teams include people with diverse life experiences. Feedback and revision. Creativity is an iterative process. Teams need to share ideas early and get feedback to rework and improve concepts. West Side Story is a prime example of how creative works are shaped and improved through revision in response to feedback. Role of key leaders. Visionary leaders who can motivate and assemble the right mix of talents are essential for successful, high-impact teams. But leaders also need to learn to delegate responsibility and not micromanage the creative process. Steve Jobs and Ed Catmull are examples of leaders who build great teams by establishing a shared vision but giving teams freedom to operate. Luck and unexpected discoveries. No matter how much teams plan and organize, creativity always involves an element of luck or unexpected discovery that emerges from the process. Key breakthroughs are often stumbled upon accidentally through play, experimentation, or making unexpected associations. Post-it notes and cellophane are examples of major innovations that arose through accidental discovery. So in summary, fostering team creativity requires building networks, establishing psychological safety, balancing constraints with freedom, drawing on life experiences, incorporating feedback, supporting visionary leaders, and recognizing the role of luck and surprise. When these elements come together, teams can achieve remarkable creative feats. But teamwork is challenging, and the factors that drive successful collaboration in one case may not work the same in another. Creativity ultimately comes down to people, relationships, and serendipity as much as any prescriptive process. In 2007, Cincinnati Public Schools launched an initiative called the Elementary Initiative to turn around low-performing schools. The goals were to improve student achievement, close achievement gaps, and increase high school graduation rates. A key part of the Elementary Initiative was training teachers and principals in how to use data to inform their decisions and instruction. The district brought in an education professor, Elizabeth Holtzapfel, to help develop a data-driven teacher evaluation system. The Elementary Initiative focused on 19 low-performing elementary schools. The district provided these schools extra resources and support. Performance at the targeted schools improved significantly. For example, one school, South Avondale Elementary, went from 27% of students passing state reading and math tests in 2000 to 86% passing in 2009. The Cincinnati approach emphasized using data to identify problems, develop solutions, track progress, and make adjustments. The district trained teachers and principals in how to analyze student test scores, grades, attendance, and behavior to identify students' needs and shape lessons. Other components of Cincinnati's turnaround strategy included implementing a new principal evaluation system, expanding teacher teams within schools, training content specialists, becoming more community engaged, and providing extra resources and support for low-performing schools. The district's reforms were largely successful in improving student outcomes, closing achievement gaps, and increasing high school graduation rates. Cincinnati's experience provides an example of how data and evidence can be used to transform struggling schools. The key elements are using data and evidence to guide decisions and instruction, targeting resources and support, ongoing monitoring and adjustments, comprehensive reforms at multiple levels, and building capacity through professional development and collaboration. The summary highlights how Cincinnati systematically improved low-performing schools through a data-driven approach. The school district implemented an initiative focused on using data and analysis to improve low-performing elementary schools. The goal was to create a collaborative culture that involved families, schools, the district, and the community. They used data to diagnose issues and determine solutions, similar to how doctors use diagnostics for critical care patients. Though data was key, leadership and teacher commitment were also essential for success. Reforms turned around an inner-city school, South Avondale Elementary, which went from very low state test scores to leading the district. The school district studied what worked at South Avondale and 15 other schools to help shape district-wide changes. Success came from addressing students' academic, social, and emotional needs. While data helps, it can also lead to information overload where there are too many options to process, causing information blindness. Giving people too much data can make decisions harder by creating an overchoice effect. For example, research found that employee 401k participation dropped by 1.5 to 2% for every 10 fund options added after 30 choices. To avoid overchoice, tools like winnowing and scaffolding can help. These limit options and shape the decision-making process, often in ways people hardly notice. They utilize cognitive strategies to filter and frame information, guiding choices while allowing some freedom and control. Overall, data should drive education reforms and improvements. But it needs to be balanced and scaffolded to avoid overchoice and ensure the most important information for decision-making is highlighted. Strong leadership and a collaborative culture are also key to data-driven changes that transform student outcomes. Disfluency refers to the experience of difficulty in processing information. Research by Alter, Oppenheimer, and others has shown that disfluency can lead to deeper learning and improved decision-making. However, some recent studies have challenged these findings or found that the effects are complex. According to Alter, disfluency causes information to be processed more deeply, leading to longer-lasting memories. The more people elaborate on disfluent information, the more they remember. Disfluency also leads to psychological distance, causing people to think more abstractly. Studies have found disfluency impacts educational outcomes, risk-taking, reasoning, and more. However, the effects seem to depend on the situation and specific manipulations. Disfluency's impact may be less generalizable than originally thought. Charlotte Flood, a debt collection manager, said she was able to succeed by picking up on subtle details about her team and conveying information in a way they would understand. She took a human-centered approach, caring for her team personally and professionally. This style of management and communication likely contributed to her team's success. An intervention that taught students the engineering design process led to improved outcomes. It helped students frame problems systematically and logically. However, people tend to rely on examples that come easily to mind, which can interfere with considering new approaches. Reframing problems can help overcome this tendency. A study found that students who took notes by hand retained lecture content better than those who took notes on laptops. The longhand note-takers took fewer verbatim notes and performed better on conceptual questions. The researchers suggested that laptop note-taking may encourage mindless transcription rather than synthesis and summarization. Gen 1-inch programs provide extra support for first-generation college students. These students face additional challenges in accessing and succeeding in higher education. Students who took notes on laptops had more detailed and verbose notes compared to those who took notes by hand. However, the researchers expected that the laptop note-takers would perform better on assessments because they had more information in their notes to review. Surprisingly, the laptop note-takers did not outperform the longhand note-takers on short-term assessments. The researchers concluded that even though the laptop notes contained more content, the students did not fully process and encode that information during the lecture. Simply having more information in their notes was not enough. The researchers speculated that the laptop note-takers might perform better if given more time to study their notes, but that approach would likely be inefficient compared to taking more concise notes by hand during the actual lecture.